Personality and sport.
What is personality? Personality is the sum of the characteristics that make a person unique. The study of personality helps us to better work with students, athletes, patients, and exercisers, and to even work more effectively with coworkers. Sometimes people confuse attitude and personality. Personality is who you are, and attitude can be more dependent upon your situation or other people. Defining personality can be a little tricky, but all definitions have included one aspect: uniqueness. As you are listening to this lecture, think about these next 4 questions. These questions will not be a part of your examination, but they can be helpful to ponder when we're discussing personality. Your answer is unique to you. Your answers may be individualized and unique to you as they are part of your personality. Number 1, how can personalities influence performance or attractiveness of a particular sport to a particular individual? If you have played a sport or participated in physical activity, how did you choose it? Was it something your parents put you in, or was that something you decided? Number 2, what forces how we behave as we do in certain circumstances? Does your personality determine how you react? If you stub your toe, do you cry out in pain? Do you get really quiet? Or do you use choice curse words? Do you punch things? What is your individual reaction? Number 3, do athletes who play certain sport have similar personality characteristics? Can you think back to any of your other experiences or other people with whom you have participated? Did they have a similar personality as you? Were they competitive? Were they loud or quiet? Did you have a lot of personality traits in common with these other individuals? And lastly, does sport build character, or is it related to positive character or psychological development? Do you personally feel like participation in physical activity or sport can help someone to build character? Are sports and exercise related to developing individuals? And we're back to the lecture, so if you were taking notes, this is a good time to start back up. The best way to understand personality is through its structure. If we think about personality as being divided into 3 separate but related levels, a psychological core, a typical response, and a role-related behavior. The basic level of personality is the psychological core. This includes your attitudes, values, interests, and motives, as well as your beliefs about yourself and your self-worth. This is considered the real you, not who you want others to think you are. These are typically things that you value in your life, like family, friends, and even your religion. A typical response is the way we learn to adjust to the environment or how we usually respond to the world around us. For example, being happy-go-lucky or even shy. How you act and what you perceive your social situation to be is called a role-related behavior. This behavior is the most changeable aspect of your personality. Your behavior changes as your perceptions of the environment around you changes. Different situations require us to play different roles. For example, your behavior as a student, or as a parent, or even as a friend may all be very different. The 3 levels of personality encompass a continuum from internally driven to externally driven behaviors. To examine this role-related behavior is the most external thing that everyone sees about each other. The most internal aspect is the psychological core. The psychological core is the most stable or consistent part of your personality, and it remains fairly consistent over time. The role-related behaviors are the most external and can be subjected to the greatest influence from external social environmental factors. In order to help individuals to become more successful, more proficient, or more motivated, we must figure out what makes people tick to be able to help them and to motivate them to change. We need to know as much about them as possible to be able to affect people's core values and to assist with rehabilitation or improve performance. So, what really makes up a person? Personality is what we can see on the outside. Character are internal characteristics. As we are going along in this course, it is important to remember several things. Psychology and most other fields are filled with approaches and theories. These theories and approaches provide us with the basis for understanding and explaining why and how various things occur. It is also important to remember that some are applicable to some people in some situations, while others are not. Some are current, relevant, and studied, and some are not. As we are trying to understand personality, it is important to differentiate between states and traits. States represent our current or situational state of being. These can change with the situation. Traits represent our general or most of the time state of being. Measures of both traits and states. A trait is a typical style of behavior. A state is the situation's effect on behavior, a right now feeling that can change from moment to moment. There are general versus situation-specific or sport-specific measures that can be taken. Situation-specific trait tests predict behavior more accurately than do general trait measures. It is often more effective to compare personality test scores to a person's own previous test results than to a group of norms. Projective tests may have interesting results, but can be extremely difficult to score. Psychologists have been examining personality from multiple viewpoints. 5 of the major ways of studying personality in sport and exercise have been called the psychodynamic, trait, situation, interactional, and phenomenological approaches. The first approach we will examine is the psychodynamic approach. This approach was popularized by Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and Erik Erikson. This approach is divided into 2 themes. The first places emphasis on unconscious determinants of behavior. This includes indistinct drives, moral consciousness, and conscious personality. The second theme focuses on understanding the whole person. The psychodynamic approach views personality as a set of dynamic processes in conflict with each other. Behavior is then determined by several unconscious, constantly changing factors that are often conflicting with one another. Emphasis is placed on understanding the person as a whole rather than identifying isolated traits. The second approach is the trait approach. The trait approach states that personality can be described in terms of individual traits. These traits are relatively stable. They also predispose us to act in certain ways regardless of the situation. Personality traits are enduring and consistent across a variety of situations. By taking the trait approach, psychologists consider that the cause of behavior generally resides within the person and that the role of situation and environmental factors is minimal. Remember, traits are considered to predispose a person to act a certain way, regardless of the situation or the circumstance. The trait approach, which dominated the early study of personality, does not consider the particular situation that might also influence an individual's behavior. Today, the Big 5 trait model of personality is most widely accepted. The approach to this test is to have individuals answer a lot of different questions about their trait personality. This is the most accepted descriptive model of personality. This consists of 5 major dimensions of personality. There are 5 dimensions of the trait model. Neuroticism includes nervousness, anxiety, depression, and anger versus emotional stability. Extroversion includes things like enthusiasm, sociability, assertiveness, and high activity level versus introversion. Openness to experience includes things like originality, the need for variety, and curiosity. Agreeableness includes amiability, altruism, and modesty. And conscientiousness includes constraint, achievement striving, and self-discipline. All of these domains have been found to organize personality at the highest level. The Big 5 trait model has started to be applied to sports populations recently as well. This is an activity that we will do in class. You will answer some questions and determine which of the Big 5 personality factors is most like you. We are going to take a Big 5 personality trait assessment during our course. You will log into Blackboard, and under this course unit and lecture, you will find a Big 5 personality test web link. If you click on the web link, you can take the assessment. You will click on the Take It button, and it will start your assessment. You will answer a series of questions to determine how you score over the Big 5 personality factors. Please answer the questions as truthfully and as honestly as possible. It isn't important what your results from this test are, specifically, but we are going to use the information to tell a little bit more about your personality and learn a little bit more about you. At the end of your test, you will receive results. So these results will become important to an assignment that we will do for personality. You will be turning in your results, so you will want to make sure that you save a copy. Oftentimes, with the Big 5 personality factors, a low score in one area means that we probably have a pretty high score in another area. We can see the traits openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism in the middle. If we have a low score, we probably have certain characteristics. For example, for openness, if we have a low score, we're probably pretty practical, conventional, and prefer routine. If we have a high score in openness, we probably are curious, have a wide range of interests, and are more independent. We can see how this would work for each of these traits. This table may be helpful as we explore our personality as well. The situational approach states that personality is determined mostly by situation and/or our environment. This means that personality is based on modeling and feedback. Another approach is the interactional approach. This approach considers the situation or environment and person as co-determinants of behavior. This theory is now highly favored for studying behavior. The last approach is the phenomenological approach. This approach states that behavior is best determined by accounting for situation and personal characteristics. This means that a person's understanding and interpretation of oneself and environment are critical. This theory is also currently favored and is widely used. Overall, in summary, these 5 different approaches or viewpoints can help us determine personality. The different approaches have allowed us to understand personalities at many different levels. And these approaches vary along a continuum of behavior determination, ranging from the view that behavior is determined by a person's internal characteristics, such as the psychodynamic theory, to the view that behavior is determined by the situation or environment, such as the situational approach. On the other hand, these approaches vary greatly in terms of assumption about the origin of human behavior, such as whether behavior is determined by fixed traits or by consciousness or subconscious determinants, and how important a person's active interpretation of self and the environment are. Currently, interactional and phenomenological views are the most often accepted among the literature. So what about common sense? How does it play into the psychology of sport? We know many athletes that are insanely successful. So what about the research? Is there anything that links personality to success? Please know that you do not have to memorize all of the research related to the psychological aspects of sport and exercise. The only reason why we are discussing these studies is to better understand what areas have previously been examined. We know that there is a relationship between personality states, traits, and performance. However, it is a far from perfect relationship. The link from traits to performance relationships have been identified. There is no single personality profile to separate athletes from non-athletes. However, athletes tend to pose greater objectivity, independence, and tend to be less anxious than non-athletes. There are a few distinguishable characteristics that have been found between genders, particularly at the elite level of athletics. Morgan's 1980 mental health model was comparing personality traits of more successful athletes with those of less successful athletes using a measure called the Profile of Mood States, or the POMS. Morgan developed a mental health model that he reported to be effective in predicting athlete success. This research suggests a greater positive mental health in successful athletes than in non-successful athletes. The scores were based on the Profile of Mood States test. Successful elite athletes in a variety of sports, for example, swimmers, wrestlers, oarsmen, and runners, are characterized by what Morgan called the iceberg profile, which reflects positive mental health. The iceberg profile of a successful elite athlete shows vigor above the mean of a population, but tension and depression, as well as anger, fatigue, and confusion are below the mean of the population. This profile looks a little bit like an iceberg in that all negative traits are below the surface or population norms, and the one positive trait, vigor, is above the surface. In contrast, less successful elite athletes have a flat profile, scoring at or below the 50th percentile on nearly all psychological factors. Personality tests are useful tools that help us to better understand, monitor, and work with athletes and those who exercise. They are not magical instruments that allow us to make sweeping generalizations about individuals' behavior or their performance. Exercise appears to have a positive relationship with self-concept. Exercise and increased fitness are associated with increases in self-esteem. We see larger effects in individuals with lower self-esteem. This research has suggested that changes in self-concept may be associated with perception of improved fitness rather than with actual changes in physical fitness. For example, girls participating in a running program had positive changes in their global self-esteem and appearance, peer, physical, and running self-concepts. Type A behavior patterns can be apparently altered through exercise. This can reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. Type A behavior is characterized by a strong sense of urgency, an excess of competitive drive, and easily aroused hostility. Type B behavior is considered the opposite of Type A behavior. A link has been established between Type A behavior and the increased incidence of cardiovascular disease. Based on their research we currently have regarding personality and the sport type or sport choice, we do not have any way to tell what sport fits an individual's personality best. In another example, personality and athletic research findings. Thier and Greer in 1981 examined personality traits of bodybuilders. They found that bodybuilders had high scores in achievement motivation and resistance to change. The bodybuilders ranked normal everywhere else. In another research study by Kroll and Crenshaw in 1970, they examined football, wrestling, karate, and gymnastics participants. They suggested wrestlers and football players had similar profiles. Gymnasts and karate participants had markedly different profiles from the wrestlers and the football players. Other researchers have examined the effects of psychological characteristics on participants in both team and individual sports. Singer in 1969 examined baseball and tennis players. They demonstrated definite psychological differences between team and individual sport athletes. Team players scored higher in desire to do one's best, desire to lead, and the ability to analyze others. The team players were less willing to accept personal blame. Another research team also observed the personality traits of participants of team and individualized sports. Schur, Ashley, and Joy in 1977 found that team sport participants reported more anxious, dependent, extroverted characteristics and are less sensitive to others. Other researchers have examined player position and personality profiles. Cox in 1979 examined different athletes participating in volleyball. They found that compared to strong side hitters and middle blockers, setters have broad internal focus and could focus on several things at once compared to other athletes. Perfectionism has been one of the most widely studied personality characteristics in sports psychology in recent years. Perfectionism is a personality style characterized by setting extremely high standards of performance, striving for flawlessness, and a tendency to be overly critical in evaluating one's performance. Perfectionism consists of various components, including setting high standards, feeling concerned over mistakes, and being highly organized. Self-oriented perfectionism is the degree to which one sets high personal standards and stringently self-evaluates relative to those standards. Socially prescribed perfectionism is the degree to which one perceives significant to others holding high standards for the person and bases approval on meeting those high standards. Other-oriented perfectionism is the degree to which one holds others to extremely high standards. Depending on the specific components of characterizing one's perfectionistic personality, perfectionism can lead to both highly positive and extremely negative consequences, either maladaptive or healthy perfectionism versus adaptive or unhealthy perfectionism. The differentiation between perfectionistic striving versus perfectionistic concern is seen as especially critical in terms of determining whether perfectionism has a positive or negative effect on the individual. This has been widely studied. Personality has also been studied, along with perfectionism, and with this we see personality styles. We see individuals setting high standards of performance, striving for flawlessness, and a tendency to be overly critical in evaluating their performance. So how can you, as a budding professional, understand personality? How can you use this information to better understand individuals in your classes, on your teams, or your future clients? These guidelines can help us to better understand people with whom we work. Remember, personality needs to consider both personality traits and situations. We need to be an informed consumer of personality testing, and we also need to be a good communicator. You also may have heard that sometimes it's good to be an observer. It's better to be quiet and just observe. We also need to be knowledgeable about mental strategies to help those with whom we work who wish to excel, and we also need to know referral services if they are beyond our capabilities. To wrap this all up, let's recap and discuss the important aspects of personality in sport. Personality is complicated. The basic unit of personality is uniqueness. In learning about people, we can better learn how to help them achieve greatness. Additionally, understanding the athletes with whom we work on a daily basis can help to increase our relationship with them and also increase our patient compliance.